Hey everyone, Set in Stone answering questions, and we're on commandment number 7, and this was the one. This was the one that had a lot of questions, and I've even filtered through some of these to collate them all. There's quite a lot to go through, so I'll be as quick as I can with this. The commandment, for those who really for some reason don't know what it is do not commit adultery. It's always interesting. Let's talk about sex, and everybody's interested. Nothing new in that area. So all right, we got somebody here saying the question was to do with, I talked about adultery and the faithfulness in marriage, but what about dating? Does this apply? Does faithfulness need to apply with boyfriend-girlfriend relationships as well, and to what extent? It depends on what you mean by dating, and it depends on what the purpose of that dating relationship is. But yeah, you violate faithfulness to a boyfriend or girlfriend, there's consequences. So in that sense, being faithful and having character in a good way in how you treat one another, that's very, very significant. So of course there are consequences when we are unfaithful in all of our relationships, but it applies in dating as well. And that also applies to what we would call pre-marital sexual activity in the same realm. There is the gift of sex in marriage. It's in marriage is there, and the marriage bed being kept pure and going for God's best. And it is part of building what we said, fences around that relationship. So I do think how we treat our dating relationships should have the posture of faithfulness, should still be there. And the question is, but is it adultery if you're boyfriend girlfriend? I'd say no, it's not adultery unless your boyfriend or girlfriend is married, then it is adultery. But no, it's not adultery. But is it outside of God's best? Then it is outside of God's best. I'll do my best here because there's quite a few to get through. And people said this, it seems that premarital sex doesn't hurt anyone. You know, what's the issue? It doesn't hurt anyone. Who says it doesn't hurt anyone? I'm just going to say this. The act of sex is a very intimate, spiritual thing. And there is the giving of oneself to another and them to you. And the reality is that's something that you give. And once it's given, it's been given. And so metaphorically, there could be pieces of you to all various different people that you have given yourself to, and it might not seem that it's hurting anybody, but you don't know. You don't know the impact of that other person that you may have slept with and how they feel about that. At the time, they may feel fine, but post that, there could be a sense of guilt and shame and feeling violated in some way. You don't know how you yourself are going to feel when you maybe allow that to happen or impose that on somebody else in some way. And so to say it doesn't seem to hurt anybody is just on the outside doesn't seem to hurt anybody. But I would say a huge amount of core emotional beings who we are deeply impacted when it comes to intimacy. And there is no greater intimacy moment that we get to share than that within a sexual relationship. And so, you know, someone saying, I don't see the benefit in waiting. That's pretty selfish. Sorry about that. It's a pretty self-centered way. And the whole act of a mutual giving of oneself and the two becoming one is, you know, for the benefit of the other. It's a selfless act. Good question, though. It's a pretty strong answer, I know. And so, that's another one. Wrong question. Okay, super quick here then. We've got the whole area of how the church sometimes has actually made up rules on what is godly and not godly, especially as culture shifts around it all. There are some people, even in dating relationships, would say, you know, no physical contact in a dating relationship, you know, or no holding of hands, no kissing. And the lines are drawn at different levels. The Bible is not clear on that. I'm just going to say it. It was a culture that you didn't really date. If you did date, there was a chaperone. And it was arranged marriage. You know, we found a suitor for you, and there was different cultures. And in fact, the book of Corinthians given to a city, a port in Corinth, multicultural port, and all kinds of sexual activity going on there, and how Paul speaks to that city. You have to look at the historical context of what he's saying in those different situations. And so, yes, there have been some rules that we've added to that have created more burden. And some people have gone, this just seems so out there that I've been made to feel guilty for something that I don't feel guilty for. And some people actually have walked away from thinking, this Bible you're talking about seems very, very unreal. Now, it's countercultural, yes. But, you know, the whole area of singleness and dating and marriage, you know, I'll just say it, the church has often made people feel second-rate citizens because you're single. Or the Bible would say the opposite. The Bible would say the opposite. Hold singleness in a higher level than being married. And so that, I think, it's a really good discussion that you should engage with your peers and with people. Have a good discussion about what things has the church decided this is right and this is wrong, because you could search the scriptures and you won't find them. You know, we have just adapted them on. Some of them are pretty Victorian. But, you know, have really engaging, healthy conversation around that one. It brought up a lot of different ones. Is adultery limited just to sexual intimacy, or is it the breaking of a vow of anywhere in marriage? The committing of adultery very much was related to sexual sin. Yes, it was. Now, breaking any other marriage vow is to do with unfaithfulness. You know, and you can be not faithful in keeping your promise. Equally, there are some negative consequences to that. But adultery and the sexual sin, there is one there. It's grounds for divorce, which we'll also touch on in another question soon. I'll answer that one in a while. A lot of forgiveness questions came up with that one. Okay, let's just dive into some of these divorce ones. This is sensitive in some ways, you know. Does marrying someone that is divorced constitute adultery? And people said that according to Matthew 5, and, you know, someone even mentioned, you know, what if I slept with somebody who is now married to somebody else? I was married, divorced, and slept with somebody else, and, you know, what does that all look like? Relationships are messy, aren't they? Like crazy messy. I'm going to say this in the area of divorce. Every situation, is this person ready for remarriage or not? Every single situation needs to be taken one situation at a time. There's some biblical boundaries there that we can look at. Is this what do we perceive as a biblical divorce as opposed to another one? And what's the motive behind the divorce? For some people, the motive behind divorce is one of the reasons Jesus died in was, you know what, I just want somebody else now. The motive behind it is very self-centered, but there are some situations where the divorce is anything but that. And has there been restoration paths possibly to take place? What has taken place? And so you really do need to get wise counsel and talk that through. There's not a real clear, as people might want it to be super, super clear. Well, this was this, therefore it's all adultery if you get remarried. You need to read the scriptures as a whole and see the redemptive trajectory that is being set. Because what Paul says to Corinth and what Jesus is saying, you've got to look at the cultural context and apply the biblical principle to that. But in this whole area of divorce, I'm going to say this: is divorce something that God wants? No, he doesn't want it. And nobody should enter into marriage with divorce as an option. You know? So I'm uncomfortable with people who have prenups, because by default, it's basically, this is what I've got a get out clause. I didn't sign it with any get out clause when I promised vows to my wife. So there's cultural things that we can go, whoa, whoa, whoa. That doesn't seem right for followers of Jesus. But be careful on any legalistic judgmentalism on this person is wrong. Have relational conversation about it all understanding. Because I will say this, when it comes to divorce, I would say on nearly all occasions, it's come about, and when it has happened, has caused extreme pain. So let's bring compassion and support and encouragement to people in it and help them into the future. I'm going on a bit long here. It's kind of nearly 10 minutes of me rambling on and around that. I'm just letting you know, I'm more than happy here to meet with people, have conversation over coffee about some of this. I kind of want to end this one, though, with some people who raise some really good practical things. Hey, when it comes to Sexual temptation. Speak to the guys now. You need to build fences. What fences have you put in place, guys? What protections have you got? You're not immune. You're not immune to that temptation. You're not immune to that seduction. You need to build fences, provide for yourself. You need to be honest with yourself and your own eyes and be really careful with understanding your own needs. There's some wonderful books out there to do with marriage. I want to recommend a book I'm reading right now pretty slowly. It's really fresh and insightful. It's called Vertical Marriage. Really, really good, and it covers all these different arenas, and it's just stories from a married couple's experience. Really encouraging. Books like His Needs, Her Needs, really good and practical. But guys, you need to have you built some fences. You see, a fence can also be a place where you can encounter freedom inside the fence. It can bring protection from anything being a predator inside the fence. It's not to hem you in, it's to give you a freedom. And so I want to encourage you to do that. This should spark a lot of discussion, so it's good. I've gone on for 11 minutes, way too long, but you threw in a lot of questions, and I pretty much skimmed the top layer off the top. All right, next one coming up.